Hello, welcome to the Tom and John show again. Glad to have you with us. Our guest today is Beth Guertal from University of Auburn, and she's going to enlighten us all with her international work and work with phosphorus and phosphites, all sorts of very interesting materials. And I think we need to be sure that we stay on time today because we've had a little bit of technical issues. But
We all
only
have
normal.
issues, Tom. It's always. I have a question too. Beth? Are you hearing Tom's mic breaking up?
Yeah, he's really breaking up, and it's hard to hear him.
Yeah. So Tom, I don't know if it's your mic. You might want to get a little closer. But let me take over from here so we don't delay any time. So thank you.
Yeah, you're all breaking up. You're garbled.
Yeah, I don't know what.
Okay.
Beth, can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, I'm going to stay on point and talk, and then we'll hopefully get through this. Just make sure you're talking to your microphone. But I swear, after 3 years of using Google and still having the problems that we're having, I don't get it. It's crazy. Anyway, Beth, thank you for being with us. I want to give a brief introduction, and then I'll get into some of the work that you're doing with POA. I'm excited to hear about that because we're doing some POA work up here as well.
Yeah, I was really excited to see your tweet. I want to know what you guys have been doing.
Yeah, it's good. We won't get too much into our stuff, but I will tell you about it. I'm curious about your work with Dr. McElroy. So, brief bio for you. So, you're from Ohio. You went to the Ohio State University.
Yeah,
At Penn State, we have to do that.
Why is Tom booing?
I don't know. He's crazy. So, Ohio State for your master's degree, and then you went to Oklahoma State for your PhD.
Right.
You've been at Auburn for 23 years, and you're the professor of agronomy with a specialization in, you said, soil fertility and turfgrass management. So I think we all know that. You're pretty well known in the industry, and so we know some of the work that you've been doing. But why don't you, before you get into the work, just give us a little bit of a background in terms of your career and how you've got to where you are now.
Okay, so it is a convoluted path. So my master's and PhD are actually in soil fertility, crop production. So they're actually in the big four: corn, wheat, soybean, and cotton. And I came to Auburn, actually got hired to do vegetable crops. So I did vegetable crops for about 4 years. And then at the same time, the great Coleman Ward and Ray Dickens retired. Auburn offered an early buyout. This was about 1996, and they all went. And so my boss ambled down the hall and looked in and said, hey, you're now turfgrass management, soil fertility. And he did the same thing to Harold Walker, who at the time was our weed specialist for soybeans. And so Harold is actually one of the first guys that did some of the preliminary on-the-ground work with methiazolin. And so that's how I got into turf. And so we've been doing a lot of fertility work and management work in turf ever since. Most of it's on the warm season grasses with an emphasis on Bermuda, but we do have bent grass and tall fescue pretty much through the upper 2/3 of Alabama. So we do some of those cool season grasses as well. And then we battle poana as a weed down here.
It's crazy to me that that's how it started, with someone walking in saying, you're now doing turf. When I look at it, the way the industry and the market's going, it's going to be the exact opposite. Like, turf is, there's not as many students. You're now doing crops. Like,
yep.
I could see that happening.
Yep. Yeah, in fact, my last two top-notch bachelor's graduates are actually now working in row crop agronomy, 100% row crop, and my most current PhD student will definitely take a row crop job.
That's crazy to me. My master's student who went on to work with Lane Treadway, and now he's at UC Riverside, he's not in turf either. I mean, he's doing molecular work and extension, but not in turf. So I guess you got to be pretty well-rounded to be able to get a job.
Yeah, and with that, we've seen all the long-term big old names in soil fertility have retired on the row crop side. A lot of them. We're starting to redo them, but a lot of them have retired. Let me close out my email so you all can not see. There we go. And so over half my funding budget right now is row crop agronomy.
Wow. Well, you got to go where the money is to pay for
Yeah, I hate it though, but that's how it is.
Don't tell that to your supporters.
No, I like doing row crop. It's not that I hate it, but it's just a shame that that's how funding works.
Right. Okay, let's get into some of the POA. We've been doing some up here, I think slightly different than you. We're more looking at, well, we have iron in our plots and PGRs and some management things, but you're doing something a little bit different with Scott McElroy. So tell us a little bit about the work you're doing down there.
So the things we did with Scott, and this was actually all out of a grad student by the name of Caleb Briscoe, who's actually the one I mentioned. He's now the research director for the Alabama Peanut Association. There you go. But what Scott had him starting on was some work with looking at adjustments in soil pH and adjustments in phosphorus, or how phosphorus affects it. And then Scott and I kind of wandered into zinc. And this is another one of those odd things, because we were actually looking at a removable turf paint. So this was a zinc oxide-based white coating that was supposed to be sprayed onto turf, and then you would go back with a weak citric acid solution to pull that paint off. So it was for, say, like a multi-use field where you'd have a soccer tournament followed by something else, and you needed the paint to go away. So everywhere we had sprayed the removable turf paint, the following spring, Harold Walker came into me and he said, "Hey, did you look at those old plots?" And I said, "Not recently." "Why?" He said, "Anywhere you sprayed zinc oxide, there is no annual bluegrass. The plots are completely clean." So we tried to go back and kind of back calculate our zinc rates, and then that's what's moved into the research side of things.
So is this like, I mean, paint, so you got paint and you're putting it in lines and the lines over and over and over?
Yeah, so I have pictures of it. So the company wanted us to do simulated lines and simulated numbers, but everywhere there was a square of paint or a line of paint, there was 0 annual bluegrass. So the rates were really, really high. I mean, the rates approached the zinc loading rates, where if you're using sewage sludge, the US EPA is like, boy, that's way too high, because it's a heavy metal and you have to be careful. So, and I wrote down some of the numbers. So we've since gone back and I want to check on that, and looked at some of the rates. And so now we're anywhere, a ballpark rate, we're about 3 pounds of zinc per 1,000 square feet. Now that's actual zinc. That's not zinc sulfate. And we've looked at zinc sulfate and zinc EDTA and zinc oxide. And it is the zinc. They all appear to have the ability to behave as a pre-emergent material for controlling annual bluegrass. It's not 100%, but they lower the populations. When you go to that more middle rate, so we had some pretty high rates, but at around 45 to 90 kilograms per hectare, which works out at about 1.8 pounds per 1,000, we had some pretty good reductions in populations of annual bluegrass. Now, one of the things that interests me is, okay, you're putting out a metal, it shouldn't be going anywhere. We should be able to see a year-to-year control once you've applied it, and we are seeing that. So we're in about our 3rd year of kind of tracking how we're continuing to get control from applying this zinc.
The zinc's not mobile? It'll stick around?
No. Now, one of the things you got to watch, it gets a little more soluble as your pH drops in the soil. So it's kind of a balancing act. But in the systems in which we're working that have a fair amount of organic matter and the pH is not, I'm talking about mobility like with a pH of 4, it should hang around for quite a while. So we're kind of tracking these plots to see where we go.
Your plots probably have quite a bit of transition. They basically will. You don't have a perennial type crop down there, right? I mean.
Oh yeah, we have perennial POA.
Oh, so it stays. It's not like this is only a pre-emergent in the fall issue. You can actually post-emergent.
It's great, and it's got a pre-emerge. It doesn't tend to function as well as a post, which is interesting, and we kind of need to sort that out. And that's a really great question, John, because our pools of POA down here are mixtures of both perennial and annual. So we've got the POA reptans, we've got the Poana. And in fact, the paper that Scott McElroy published, which I think was the early 90s, where he went all over the southeast and isolated these perennial POA plants, we're finding them on a lot of golf courses.
So what's the potential use of this? I mean, is it something that EPA would just crush, or is it something?
Yeah, well, here's the irony. The research was actually funded by the EPA. So we got a grant to look at IPM strategies for control of POA. Some other things we're doing that I haven't yet crunched the data on is looking at nitrate versus ammonium forms, because we know that POA is happier at a higher pH. So if you can keep that pH a little bit on the lower side, it also, the plants are smaller, they don't produce as many seed heads, they're not as robust. So we're looking at things like that. There's a really cool old paper that Rock Wasaw did a while ago that just simply reduced POA by removing the clippings and pulling off the seed head. So we're doing some work with that as well. So the EPA funded it. But the thing I got to figure out is what's the absolute lowest we can go, stay within a safe level, and how long, once it's in the soil, is it going to hang around and work. And I really think the ultimate tool, and Scott and I have talked about this, is combining it with some pre-emerged materials to see if you can get kind of a synergistic effect.
Nice. So this is work that you're continuing, though. Is the grant ongoing?
No, the grant, we got a one-time grant, but we're still continuing it, yeah. And by no means do I want superintendents going out and slinging zinc everywhere, because it is a heavy metal. But the thinking superintendent, the guys who are really thinking about this, the very next question I get when I present this, and it's an awesome question, is what about manganese? You know, what about if we look at those suite of metals that are in that same spot along the periodic table? Are they going to function the same way? And that's something we want to look at, because we also know that some of these guys are using these high rates of iron for POA control. It sounds like, are you looking at that?
Yeah, we have work going on with that as well. And so our big study, I mean, we're literally in the middle of the 7th year of this study. So
that's fabulous.
It's I don't know how we have a study going on for 7 years because we don't have any funding for it. We're just keeping it up.
Yeah, I've got a nitrogen one like that that's in year 10, and it just keeps wandering on.
Yeah, seeing these results of these long-term studies, what happens. But our study is looking at high iron rates. It's actually looking at none, a low rate, and a high rate. 2 rates of nitrogen, all ammonium sulfate. It's kind of the acidifying type effect.
Mm-hmm.
And low meaning like a half a pound a year, or 3 pounds a year would be our normal rate. And then we're looking at PGRs too, Primo, Cutlass, and none.
Yeah, and there's some really interesting work with Cutlass and Primo on POA populations, so that'll be great to have. Are you seeing the pH drop significantly in that 3-pound N rate?
We're not seeing it drop that significantly. Surprising. In Maryland, we did a bunch of work, and in a year and a half, we dropped our pH from 6.8 to 5.5, at least in the top inch, like that.
Yeah, right. And you're doing, I always tell superintendents if they're using those ammonium-forming fertilizers, I like to really see a pH like in that top inch, because we tend to do 3 to 4 inches, and I think sometimes we're masking what we're doing right at the surface, and since POA shows shallow-rooted, I think that's an impact.
Yeah, and we do both that. We do 1 inch, and then we do 0 to 1 and 1 to 2, because I think it's...
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. I mean, and if you look at the suite of everything you're paying for, pH is a cheap measurement to have, and I think it's one of the most important.
Yeah, I'm surprised we're not seeing such a large drop, though, and we're looking at it, but what we are seeing, though, is huge differences in our POA population.
Well, are you on a really, really sandy green?
Yeah, it's I can't even remember if it's not a calcareous sand, which that's what I would think we would be able to have it buffered more. But it's a sand base green. It's not a USGA green, but it's a sand.
I'd like to hear Tom's thoughts on this, because I think sometimes when you're in equilibrium with CO2 in these really sandy soils, that the pH is it'll stay up sometimes. I don't know. What's Tom's thoughts on that?
Tom, you're muted, so make sure you unmute.
Unmute, Tom.
You woke him up. He was in a slumber.
Dealing with his dog or whatever.
I can't unmute him. So
man!
At the top of your screen, Tom, there's a little mute button. Just click on it and turn it off. But while he's getting unmuted, Beth, I'll say that our populations in our plots range from probably 4 or 5% POA up to 80%, depending on what.
Where our zinc, our lowest, any zinc rate, which we ranged from 2 to 6, and that's zinc, not zinc sulfate. We had our populations were from 2 to 10%, and then our checks were usually 60 to 70%.
Tom, you still having problems trying to unmute? At the top of your screen, when you hover over, there should be like a little thing that pops up, and the second item is the microphone. Just click on that again. It should be red for you, but if you click and turn it off, then there you are. Now you turn it back on. So just make sure it's not red.
It's not red.
Okay. So I think Beth had the question about the pH issue, sand greens, and maybe.
Oh, pH and POA.
Well, the pH in the soils, do you think in the sand-based greens that they're staying in, do you think that the equilibrium with CO2 keeps the pH up a little higher, or do you think that's not a function?
I don't, it could be a contributor,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think it's a driver.
Okay. You just think that the pH up there is just going to be a little higher in those soils.
Correct.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's the pH?
I think that the important thing I've heard, you guys talking about where you take the sample to test, and I think you're both correct in that. The key is in the upper inch.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, you want to go deeper just to monitor what's going on further down the root zone, but
Mm-hmm.
all the action in a POA stand is in the upper inch.
You know,
That's where everything happens.
I always get asked, and I truly don't know the answer, and it's a small research project I want to do, is removing the thatch versus not when you send those samples off. What do you like to do, Tom?
Well, I just soon get rid of it.
Okay. What do you do, Tom?
It's fairly common in Bermuda areas to control POA by driving the pH down in the mid-low fives, and POA just hates that. I mean, it just doesn't do well at all.
Yep.
Beth, you asked about what I like to do is remove actual thatch, so the green tissue, all the verdure, anything where we have no soil in there. We top dress, almost weekly or bi-weekly. And so we have a really good integration plan into that kind of mat layer. I don't dispose of the mat. I keep that layer and I break it up and try and but I will get rid of the tissue, like any of the tissue that's up there, or the organic matter that doesn't have a good integration of.
Yeah.
But I do. I put the sand there, and the crowns and the stem base in that area. If we chop that off and get rid of it, then I still feel like we're losing some information.
You're breaking up really badly.
I was saying that I feel like
there we go.
I feel like if I lose the sand that we've incorporated in, and I chop that off and just go below that that mat layer, then I feel like we're losing. But I like to include that in my soil sample.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool.
So anyway, lots of good work on POA. You mentioned also some of the work that you're doing with phosphites, and you specifically said the nutritional aspects. I'm excited to see this.
So here's what's going on with the phosphites, which is really, and I've got to keep working on this. The master's students who was doing this just went off to Texas A&M for his PhD. But phosphite very clearly has strong fungicidal properties. We know that. But interestingly, phosphite in the plant, and John Dempsey over in the UK has been doing a lot of great work on this for his PhD. It doesn't convert to phosphate. So there's absolutely zero nutritional evidence up front for phosphite as a fertilizer nutrient. But this is what's so amazing. You have to go back to a 1952 article by Fred Adams. And this is how small the world is. That was Fred's PhD work. He ended up becoming the soil chemist at Auburn University. So in 1952, his research was to look at how phosphite converts to phosphate in the soil. And what he found out was that a wide range of microorganisms do it, and the half-life of the conversion is somewhere around 3 to 4 months. And that's it. No one else has ever explored it again, which is incredible. So my student went and redid it. We did the IC, some ion chromatograph work, where we could trace phosphite and phosphate to see when the conversion was happening in various fertilized greens mixes and soils. And he confirmed what Fred found. It happened actually a little bit faster in lighter weight soils, so somewhere around 3 months. So that phosphite is getting kicked over into phosphate. But if you have, this is the funky part, if your soil is really, really low in phosphate, so that's the fertilizer nutrient, phosphite can actually become toxic. So the question is, and there's lots of literature to show that if you have low phosphate testing soils and you add phosphite, the plants don't grow as well. They look, in fact, Penn State's got a great little picture of an annual bluegrass plant with phosphorus deficiency because it's only received phosphite on their webpage where they talk about this. If the phosphate is sufficient, if you've got lots of fertilizers, phosphorus, the phosphite is fine. So the question is, as we apply less and less fertilizer phosphorus, and yet we have a lot of phosphite-based programs, are we setting ourselves up for damage? And the preliminary work we've been doing in the greenhouse is saying no, we're not. The levels of phosphate in the soil are fine, they're high enough, and the amounts of phosphite that we're applying in these various products don't appear to be hurting our bent grass much. But we're at the greenhouse right now, and this is, I really think it's something we need to continue to explore.
So how long do you think it would take, though, with the reductions in phosphorus use? And I don't know how much you have it down there where we are.
It's a lot. And that's the take-home question that I want to continue to expand on, because I would like to get to the point where a superintendent would say, okay, here's my phosphite program. I'm using something like PK Plus, or I'm using some of these commercial products that are out there that are perfectly wonderful as a fungicidal regime. And, you know, a lot of them are not labeled as a fungicide, so they have kind of ubiquitous things like helps with summer stress. So I would like to get to the point where I can say to a superintendent, if your Bray or Malic extractable P is at this level, you need to be a little careful with your phosphite program. Or I can say, no, you don't need to be careful at all, you're fine. You just don't need to be applying any more than X amount of phosphite. That's where I think we need to get.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, well, it sounds ideal anyway in terms
yeah.
of...
And if you look in the literature, there is a lot of research showing that in low phosphate situations, excessive phosphite can cause reduced plant growth and toxicity. And the reason why is genetically it triggers an enzyme in the plant, and the plant thinks, I'm fine, life is good, I've got a lot of phosphate, but it really doesn't because it's phosphite. But the problem is it's all greenhouse, it's all growth chamber, and it's all solution chemistry. We haven't got the field work to see if it's a real problem.
Yeah, I would imagine that this would only be a problem on sand-based systems.
I think you're exactly right, and like really low P soil tests. But you're correct. We've got 11 states that have phosphorus, maybe more now, that have phosphorus fertilizer restrictions, or you know, there's things where now most of those are still kind of protected, because if you read the legislation, it says if a phosphorus soil test is recommended, you can apply P. So within that realm, which is somewhere between 40 pounds per acre P2O5 typically, that's where the trigger point is, where your soil test is going to say we need to apply P, you're fine.
What if, I don't know what the recommendations are for phosphorus with the minimal sustainable level nutrient that...
I don't know what those are for, and you know, he just published that paper. I'm so pleased to see that. Micah now has that in the referee literature.
Oh, good. I haven't seen it yet. I'll have to...
Just tweeted that this week. I'd be making up a number. I don't know. I mean, our work has shown, and I know from talking to people in the Northeast, the trigger point on like a Malic or a Bray is somewhere between 40 to 60. So like if you come back in Ohio, I know, with like a Bray soil test of 60 pounds per acre, they may say, hey, you need to put a little P on. And I'm going to sit here and say, you're probably not going to see a response to that P. The vast majority of work in turf is showing we can back off on that phosphorus, and the turfgrass plant is not going to suffer.
Yeah, well, that's my question and concern. So if we push towards a lower amount as necessary, so you're looking at the minimal levels, and say, I'm down there, but I'm going to keep pushing because I don't see a response and things are fine.
And yet I'm using phosphite.
Right, but we're still phosphites, which we've been recommending for the last several years.
I completely see no reason to back off phosphite yet. I do think it would be well worth our time to have 3 or 4 folks look at like soils, sand soils where you have a phosphorus, like a Bray extractable P of anywhere from 4 to 6, and some different rates of phosphite to see if we're causing any trouble. Right now my answer is I don't think we are, but I'd love to have some more data to confirm that.
Yeah, and we don't have any greens where we in the field anywhere where we...
Right, we don't either.
Where we would have that. The only thing we see with the phosphites is you start getting too high of application, we start seeing just phytotoxicity issues.
Well, yeah, see, so what is causing that?
Yeah. It could be just a heat, spraying in the heat of the day. And
right, because one of the problems with a lot of the phosphite products is they kind of tend to be in what I call a y'all-come mix. So it's almost always potassium phosphite. And that potassium phosphite is in a mix with a little bit of iron, a little bit of nitrogen. There may be other things in it. In fact, when we did the work, just finding reagent-grade potassium phosphite was tough.
Yeah, we had to make ours.
Yeah, we did too.
All right, well, that's interesting. It's good that you're seeing that, and that in the greenhouse situation where you're doing extractable and you can drive down P.
Right. Like, I mean, literally, we were almost in a straight hydroponic sand situation.
How do you get a soil or hydroponic sand? So I was gonna say, how do you even get sand that you can have that low of?
Well, now keep in mind again, and that's another thing. And Micah's work, that he did with Frank Rossi showed that. So when I'm saying like a P of 2 to 0, that's a malic extractable P, and like a Bray, that's a fairly robust acid-based extract. And what Micah's work was showing was that we don't see any relationship between those extractants and what a turfgrass plant is doing. So that's kind of annoying because we run all these soil tests, and then honest truth is we're not seeing great correlations between the things we measure in turf and what those soil tests are telling us. So, it'd be great if we could ever get funding to do some really great calibration work. And that's where Micah's MLSN is coming from.
Tom's laughing because everything goes back to funding. So
I know. Sorry, Tom.
Trying to find the idea of funding or not, but in time
it's really a shame because especially something as crucial as soil testing, and I talk about this a lot. Our soil tests are all based back of stuff off in the 50s and 60s and 70s when times were great and experiment stations got money, and you had soil fertility researchers that were doing nothing but hard money funded calibration work.
I don't know. I know Micah talks about that a lot and how they to come about. I'm not a soil fertility expert, so I'm glad not to have to do any of that work. But we have a few minutes left here, and I don't want to shortchange it because I think it's interesting as well. You are doing crazy amounts of international work, and
like you don't. You're like the master of the plane.
I just travel and go to.
Your seat, your seat on the plane, you have your own now. You're flying Kaminsky class. I love that. You fly so much, you get your own descriptor.
Getting tougher these days. American is doing everything they can to screw me over in my.
Yeah, I know. I just crawled my way back to gold again. So the main thing we're doing, and I know I've talked to you guys about this, is Cuba, which is opening, and this week. They just got approval for for airlines to fly down now, and it's only going to open more. And there's currently plans for 26 golf courses to ring the island. Right now there is one existing golf course on the island. So, and there's one sod farm in all of Cuba. So we've been doing a lot of work to try to get it ready so that when Cuba opens, we've got this amazing group of Cuban scientists and Americans that we can all start to have these conversations about turfgrass.
How did you get involved in this? Because I went down on vacation. I mean, my wife.
I know. So weirdly, Alabama sells more chicken to Cuba than anyone else in the world. And in fact, the Cubans make jokes that apparently Alabama chickens have no breasts because of course, the American diet wants white breast meat, and the problem with that is chickens have 2 legs and 2 wings and 2 thighs, and Americans don't like them. Cubans get them. So they're always like, why do we always get your thighs? And I'm like, well, sorry. So the head of Alabama Ag, the state, he had actually gone about 26 times. So the first couple of times we went down on his tours to try to arrange these agreements with the Cuban agricultural institutions to do work. And so now we have some agreements in place that we hope we can expand with.
So where do you see that turning into opportunities for turfgrass? I know you had mentioned a conference potential.
Yeah, so conference, like have folks like you come down and help with the conferences, and then have Cubans come here. One of the largest sod growers in America has very strong, he's already written some agreements with them and trying to develop that. One of the issues, of course, is how do you get the grasses in, especially the vegetatively propagated ones, and make sure that they stay true to type and the appropriate money is being made by folks. And then the Cubans are very adamant and correct in that it will be Cuba that does these things. So that'll be interesting to see how we develop that. But surely as much as they love baseball and other things, they need grasses. I mean, it's very stuck in about 1957 right now. As you know, you went there and you saw what it was like.
Did you visit the golf course that was there?
Yeah, Veradero. Which, see, like right now, until the embargo is fully lifted, Americans are not allowed in the Cuban beach resorts. And in fact, we only got to go there because of, on the last trip I did, I had a bunch of undergraduates that were majoring in hotel and restaurant management. So we toured one of the big beach resorts, and then we got to tour the golf course because of being with turfgrass. So it's actually quite a lovely golf course. It's mixtures of seashore paspalum and Bermuda grass with a lot of carpet grass.
Yeah, I did. Obviously, I went. I got to visit some tobacco farms and music and arts and a lot of other things, but I didn't get to see the golf course. But
yeah,
I look forward to following up on this because I want to be a part of it. So.
Absolutely, yeah. No, definitely. You are on the list. So work on the Spanish, man.
I still have high school Spanish in me, and that's about it.
That's about where mine is. I'm maybe one class above that.
Yeah. So, well, I know that you have to get running soon too. I want to give.
Corn.
Yeah. What are you doing with the corn again?
Oh, it's our fundraiser. So a bunch of turf boys are out pulling sweet corn right now. They love it.
What's the temperature out?
96. It's heat stroke.
Yeah. We don't quite have that in State College, right?
It's fine.
What I'll do is I'll give everybody a final word, though. If you have anything coming up that you want to promote or talk about or mention or any final words, then Beth will start with you, and then Tom will go to you. You're muted, so make sure when your time comes you unmute that. But, yeah, Beth, anything you want to...
No, nothing much going on. Just merrily trotting along with the summer, actually. Wishing it would rain. We're in a bad drought, so there we go. Nothing much.
What's your Twitter so everybody can follow you?
What's my what?
Your Twitter.
At AU Turfert. So at AUTURFFERT.
Okay, great. Hopefully
we'll... Yeah,
we'll...
it's been fun lately because we do have this foliar nitrogen project at the Atlanta Country Club. Joe Hollis is one of the superintendents there who's been running it. He's just a dear to work with. And we are conclusively proving that 0.4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 every month in the summer, it's not good. So he's been tweeting a lot of pictures, and the nice thing about that study is it's got some of the newest bent grass cultivars. As you know, we have so little research space. When you do research at a university, you treasure your bent greens, and so it's hard. The superintendents are offered ahead of us in terms of cultivar. So this is a nice study in that it's got things like T1 and it's got an A-G blend mix in it. But some of them, it's got pure distinction. Some of the newest cultivars that superintendents want to know about are in this product.
Too much, I think. It's too much N? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, way too much. Joe's been, so if you link to my Twitter feed, you'll get them because Joe links me.
Good. Well, thanks for any final...
Just thank you, Beth.
Fun.
Yeah, well, it's been great. Put me on the Cuba list.
Oh, yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah, I don't have anything either. I just, we're in the middle of visiting students and research, and I've got 3 new grad students coming on, and my lab is kind of exploding.
3 grad students? You're insane. That's
a PhD and 2 masters. And my technician's getting a master's degree, and I've got 3 undergrads. We're expanding quite a bit.
Are you going down to Brazil for anything for the Olympics?
I am not.
I'm not either.
Pulling the Rory McElroy. I don't want the Zika virus, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, I was whacking mosquitoes like mad yesterday in Haiti. It's like, get away, you little Zika freaks.
Right. So, all right, well, that's good. I appreciate it. Beth, I will make sure I send you some of the links after this.
Terrific. Okay.
We'll post this out, but I appreciate everybody coming, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, all. See you. I'm off to corn.
Yep, stay cool.
Bye, guys.
Bye.